There's some distillers like Westward, Stranahan's and stuff that are set up for single malt. And they've been doing single malt where they're fermenting without the grain on it. But most distilleries that you're going to see popping up there having American single malts aren't going to be made the normal way where you strain the barley husks off. So because you'd either need a mash filter or a lauter tun or something to be able to take the grain out, because most places aren't set up to do that. So you're going to have a lot different tasting single malts because of that, compared to if you're comparing it to Scotch or Irish whiskey.
You're going to nerd out on us. A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters. Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan. I should have put my glass down before that.
And sitting in for Roberto tonight is Jake from Gold Eagle. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, pleasure to be back.
I like how you just said Jake from Gold Eagle, so you didn't pronounce his last name wrong this time.
Yeah, I'm questioning it again. It's Cigelnik.
I thought you were going to say Jake from State Farm. But yeah, Cigelnik.
Every time I think I'm going to get it right, I always get it wrong. So
yeah.
I took the pressure off this time. Yeah, so tonight we're going to try some American Single Malts. Which, Dan, you can probably explain what that actually means.
Yeah, it's fairly new designation. We've had the bourbon and whiskey or different whiskey designations before, but middle to end of last year is when they released the official definition for American single malt, which there's been malts around for a long time, and that's what your Scotches and your Irish whiskeys are. But basically to be considered an American single malt, you have to reach a couple different thresholds to pass. So first of all, it's going to be made of 100% malted barley, which usually we use that as just an enzyme in our whiskey to get the sugar get the starch to sugar conversion. But now this is just all straight malt. It's got to be mashed, distilled, and matured all in one distillery. So you can't source in a single malt for American single malt. It's got to be, you could, as long as it's all done at the one distillery. You're just bottling it somewhere else, technically. I believe they left a loophole in for that.
Distilled up, but yeah.
It's mashed, distilled, and matured in one distillery. So you could probably buy a finished barrel and just bottle it yourself if you wanted to. But
that's interesting because I'm pretty sure Scotch includes like the entire process. It has to be, if you're buying Scotch from one distillery, you can't bottle it and call it single malt, even though you're not blending it.
Yeah, it has to be designated as a blend if it's sourced at all, right? Right. But I mean, I am looking at the official American Single Malt Commission guidelines or rules that just got recently passed, and it doesn't say anything about bottling.
It sounds American to leave a loophole in the system.
Yeah.
Like whiskey, it's got to be distilled at no higher than 160 proof. It's got to be matured in oak casks not exceeding 700 liters. This is America, so that is 185 gallons.
And not white oak? Any oak?
Any oak.
Oak casks.
Mm-hmm. Similar to Scotch.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be new, any type of oak cask. And then got to be bottled at a minimum of 40% alcohol or 80 proof. So that's what we're starting to see. I mean, there's been a couple, not a lot, but there's been some distilleries in the U.S. that have just been producing single malts for a while. But now that there's a special designation, I'm sure we're going to be seeing a lot more single malts, American single malt whiskeys hitting the market here soon.
There's a lot of the big name distilleries are starting to distill a lot of single malt.
Jack Daniel's special release this year was a single malt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they also came out with the Triple Mash 2, which was a blend of single malt and bourbon and rye.
And Yellowstone is dropping a single malt soon.
Yeah, I saw that.
I think
High West came out with one.
Yeah, High West had their the High Country. yeah, supposedly this year is supposed to be the year of single malts. So
Yeah, I know Jim Beam's distilling a lot of single malt.
oh, nice.
We'll probably start to see some stuff from them. And then there's other places like Stranahan's, which we're drinking right now, which only makes single malt and started making single malt from the start.
Yeah.
Which is, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting because when Stranahan started up and they started distilling, American Single Malt was definitely not a thing. And nobody, I think part of the reason why they got so hot is people just started drinking it, not even realizing they're drinking single malt instead of bourbon, because you just didn't see any American single malts. And what's interesting about Stranahan's is they actually do use new charred oak, like bourbon, so you kind of pick up a lot of sweeter, more fuller bodied. And if I was tasting this blind, we're tasting 120 proof single barrel right now, I would maybe even think it's some kind of bourbon.
Yeah, it's pretty close. But it's funny because I remember, like, probably over a year ago, talking to somebody, I can't remember what, it might have been Roberto, and asked about Stranahan's, and he was like, "Oh, it's not good. Like, it's not very flavorful." And I wish he was here tonight because I bet he thought it was bourbon.
Yeah, I bet.
And didn't realize that it was single malt, you know.
Well, and I had a bottle for a long time. I won it in a golf outing. It was a whiskey basket. And there was a bottle of Gentleman Jack and a bottle of Stranahan's. And I just thought it was I was thinking it was a bourbon for the longest time. And whenever I got close to the finishing it, I'm like, wait a minute. This doesn't say anything about bourbon.
Oh, no, it was you. Yeah, you were the one that told me. Yeah, that makes sense.
Stop blaming Roberto for being dumb when it's obviously me. But yeah, that was a yellow label, but I think that was a single barrel because the guy that put that basket together had done a lot of barrel picks, I guess, for his company.
Oh.
But that was like my first time ever really trying single malt and not even knowing it.
Yeah, I think my first one was the High West one that we did on the show, like probably pretty close to a year ago.
Yeah, it's one of the earlier episodes.
Yeah, which I'd like that one. It's not bad.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think about American single malts compared to our normal bourbon and rye whiskeys and things that we're used to?
I mean, personally, I believe that there's just kind of a negative connotation about it from most people, and I think that is mostly from just not being educated on what American single malt is, and that this is a different category. I mean, at the store, we've definitely expanded our American single malt section a lot, probably about like 10 times what it was 3 years ago, and that's also because there's a lot more available now. And it's very hard to talk to a bourbon drinker about American single malt. They don't really want to listen and break into another category.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you say that because that was my exact thought process when I first started seeing them. I was like, why are people trying to pretend to make scotch?
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing too, is a lot of consumers think that it's going to be peaty just because it's single malt. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to about a bottle like this, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like peat." Like, well, there's no peat in this.
Yeah. I was hesitant to get the High West because I figured it was going to have some sort of smoke flavor to it. But I'm glad that we ended up buying it. I don't remember where I got that, though. It might have been Sam's.
Yeah. I'm still coming around, so I'm not even big yet on a lot of Irish and Scotch whiskeys yet. There's a couple I've had that I've found out that I have enjoyed, and I bought some. The Stranahan's I had was okay. I tried the Blue Label Stranahan's, Jake, at your store when I was there trying to sell product one day for fun. There was the Stranahan's rep, so I got to try that out, and they're fine. I think everyone's got different flavor profiles they like. And single malt something completely different than if you're used to bourbon or rye whiskeys or things like that. I have found a few scotches that I like. I don't think I've found an American whiskey yet, or an American single malt yet, that's been a home run that I'm like, I need to definitely stock up on these bottles. But again, the palate's developing. It just takes some time.
Mm-hmm. It's also a lot drier than bourbon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's, I think that's why a lot of bourbon drinkers tend to stay away too once they taste it, because it's definitely not as sweet as corn.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's just some different flavors, and just kind of fun to change it up and taste something different.
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of rye, and I actually prefer like that, like floral cereal-y kind of taste to like a sweeter bourbon. So I actually enjoy like Irish whiskey and mostly Highland Scotch because I'm not a big fan of the peat, though. I did get that Talisker that you recommended that one day, and I do enjoy that one. It's pretty good. Yeah. But it's definitely something that needs to be acquired over time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, the same thing with people that are newer into whiskeys, too, is they think all single malts are going to be peaty, not even realizing that Irish whiskey is not normally peated. Mm-hmm. American single malts aren't going to be normally peated. I'm sure there's going to be some that you're going to see out there, but we haven't seen them yet. The one thing with American single malt is you're not going to see anything of age that has a pretty old age statement on it for quite a while. I mean, it's a new designation, so I mean, there's been places that have been doing single malt, like Stranahan's and things, for a while, so they'll be farther along with aging on some barrels. But when you think of a lot of scotches and a lot of Irish whiskeys, they're all 10, 12, 15, 18 years plus normally. Where a lot of the stuff, does Stranahan's have an age statement on it, or is it not age stated?
This is a single barrel, so I'm sure if I reach out to the distillery, they might not be able to tell me, but it doesn't say on here.
Gotcha.
I don't think they're that old, though. I think it's like in the 4 to 6 year range.
I was gonna say, I think that's what a lot of what we're seeing out of the American single malts is 4 to 6 years.
It just hasn't been around for too long, and I mean the temperatures here tend to be warmer and more humid than Scotland and Ireland. Yep. So we get more angel share quicker than they do.
And that's part of the thing is it won't need to age as long, where Scotland's and Ireland have more of a constant temperature, or not the big fluctuation, so you're not going to get as much in and out of the barrel year to year, which is part of the reason that they age a lot of theirs so long.
Yeah, and we have the added bonus of being able to use new charred barrels, which definitely imparts more flavor than a used bourbon barrel that Scotch is typically
absolutely.
Aged in.
We were talking about it beforehand, but with single malts, we're seeing some new things pop up. But I thought it was funny today, actually, that Whistle Pig announced that they're going to have a very old single malt hit the store shelves. It's older than the distillery, so it's going to be sourced, obviously. But I also find it funny that has a higher retail price than most of the. Like, the first thing I thought of was Redbreast 27 is going to retail for cheaper. The Whistle Pig's going to retail at around $800.
Yeah.
Which seems to be Whistle Pig's motive anymore, is how much can they charge for a bottle.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how quickly it goes and what the response is to it.
I'm sure it will sell immediately wherever it goes. Will it be worth $800? Probably not, but
probably a fraction of that.
Can't knock it till you try it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Do they say what if it's aged in like sherry or finished in sherry or any of that kind of stuff?
I skimmed the article very quickly before I sent it to you.
I didn't really see much details on it.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out where it came from, where it was sourced from, but we really couldn't find anything there. But yeah,
I mean, they have contacts in Canada because that's where they were sourcing their rye from when they started up, if I'm not mistaken.
That and a lot of their whiskey was sourced out of Canada early on.
Yeah, most of their stuff still is, but I don't know who in Canada is distilling single malt.
That's the thing is there anyone in Canada that's been doing single malt?
Mm-hmm.
Their climate would be, it's not, I would say, they wouldn't have the temperature extremes that you would in Scotland and Ireland that we have in the Midwest.
So I guess
it's
that
cooler.
Also answers our question to, you can source it and release it and call it single malt.
Well, they're just calling it single malt. It didn't say American single malt.
Oh, okay. Just single
so it just said single malt.
I mean, I guess technically it could be from Scotland, right?
It could be, if they're just calling it single malt, yeah.
They just can't call it Scotch. They can't call it American, so.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you guys drinking tonight?
I'll let
we are both, I
Jake
think, drinking
explain
the
it.
Stranahan's single barrel. When I was out there 2 years ago, went out there for a snowboarding trip and popped by the distillery. Cool little place, did a little tour, tasted through the line, and I definitely think that the single barrel was my favorite. It's the only offering that they do at cash strength, so being a high proof bourbon drinker, I thought I got a lot more flavor in this one than the other proof down offerings. And I think the blue one might be in used barrels. That might be the only one that they do used barrels.
Okay.
But this one kind of a lot sweeter, a lot more full flavor, fuller body. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about it? Someone who's trying it for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, very similar takeaways. The high proof, I think, definitely helps bring the flavors out. Very, very similar to bourbon flavors. I would say that you don't get as much sweetness, or at least it's a different kind of sweet. Like, it's not that corn sweet.
Right.
It's kind of like, well, we just had the Old Elk tasting at Gold Eagle last night, and I can't remember which one, but one of the whiskeys has a really high malt content.
The straight bourbon.
Yeah, the straight
like
bourbon.
35% malt.
This kind of reminds me of that, where it's that like cereal-y kind of like, or almost like like bread kind of sweetness. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty damn good whiskey. I'm really enjoying it. It
So
sucks
Jake,
that they don't have a regular cast drink offering.
I know.
This is really good.
I mean, they should, but yeah, I guess they only sell them out of the gift shop there.
So Jake, tell us a little bit more about the distillery out there. You've been to a bunch. How does Stranahan's differ from a lot of the Kentucky distilleries you've been to?
Definitely a lot smaller. Like, it's very crafty. And it's like just outside of Denver, kind of in an industrial park. There's pop shops around it. And we didn't get to see the Rick House. That was like 2 blocks away, I think, from where their main distillery was. But really nice little gift shop, really nice little bar inside. They do a bunch of cocktails. And they have this one whiskey that is very sought after. I can't think of the name. It's like Snow something. I'm going to have to look that up. But it's like an annual release that they do, and I guess people line up, and it's a big celebration. And they had flights of that in the tasting room, which we didn't have time for, unfortunately. But I always like when a distillery offers their limited options or distillery-only products at the distillery. And they actually had a bunch of other different single barrels with like experimental mash bills, or not mash bills, just like barrels, casks, and how they're aging it, different sizes of barrels. So that's something I always look for, and that was cool.
Is it the Snowflake?
Snowflake, yeah, that's what it is. Mm-hmm. But it's that's like their big release every year, and it's always some kind of different barrel that they finish it in, or how they age it and whatnot.
Nice. That probably doesn't leave the state, right?
No, that's only at the distillery, and I think people do like line up overnight for it, type of thing.
So you haven't gotten to do a barrel pick from there yet, right?
No, I'm not sure if they offer picks.
Okay.
One distillery that does, and I really want to do a pick from, is Courage and Conviction, Virginia Distilling. They are doing some very, very good things with American Single Malt. They were actually huge behind the push to legalize the category, and their master distiller, I forgot her name, but she studied right under Nancy Fraley, like directly worked with her, and is just kind of changing the game and paving the way for American Single Malts. And what we did, were you guys at the master class that we did with them?
No, I missed that one.
Yeah, it was like last year. She was actually there at the class, and she would have been perfect to have on the podcast because she like goes super nerdy into all the enzymes and everything, like distilling and nosing and all that science stuff that is above my head. But they brought a couple different single barrels that were barrel proof, and not to knock Stranahan's, but would probably blow this away.
Yeah. Just
from what I remember tasting. It's expensive. The bottles would retail for like $100, $110. So that's kind of the only thing holding us back right now. But kind of glad we got on this podcast because it reminds me I need to reach back out to them and see what they have available right now.
This I want to circle back to that. But we actually tried that at a tasting somewhere.
A single barrel of them. Are you sure you weren't at the one that we did?
No, it was. I think it was in Marengo.
Yeah, Sam's first event. They were there.
They had their normal offering, and then they had the 3 bottles that each one was each finish type. So they got the bourbon, I think, was it sherry and cuvee?
Yeah, there's a cuvee, there's a cognac, and then the bourbon.
Oh, the cognac, that's right. Yeah, so we tried all of those. I really liked the cuvee and the bourbon. I was not a fan of the cognac finish.
Yeah.
But I did like the full blend. It was actually pretty tasty.
I think they have a sherry, too.
Yeah, I mean, that's... that would probably be a good one to do a pick on.
But so yeah, it was like 125 to 130 proof, the sample that we tried, and
nice.
It was like this Stranahan's, but just rich, and it had all the sweetness that you'd want in a single malt pour. Like not as sweet as bourbon, but it was a little sweeter than this, and definitely did not drink like it was that high proof.
Nice. So what I wanted to circle back on was why is American Single Malt seemingly so expensive compared to bourbon? Because we're
compared to bourbon
about,
and compared to Scotch and Irish whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, because we're talking about probably in the realm of like 4 to 6 years. It's not too much different than bourbon in terms of like your typical age statements. The cost of barley, I can't imagine, is so great that it warrants this type of increase.
It is
over
higher
corn.
than corn, but yeah, I wouldn't think it'd be that much higher to drive the price up that much.
Yeah,
there's a decent cost in malting and things as well that you don't have when you're spending a lot of, like the corn and rye. You're not doing anything to it besides grinding it. You do have to spend some time and effort and money on malting, which does increase the price. But again, you can see a lot of 10-year Irish and Scotches for the same price as what you're seeing a 4 to 6 year American Single Malt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that also, though, has to do with how there's just not as much angel share in Irish and Scotch whiskey. But comparing it back to bourbon, if you're reusing casks, that's a lot cheaper than buying new casks.
Yeah. That's true.
So,
there's
it kind of levels out the barley to corn price difference, I would think. I'm not a distiller, but
at least.
I should pay more attention because every time I submit a mash, I can see how much that mash costs us, based off by each ingredient in it. I should pay more attention. One thing too that's going to be different with a lot of American single malts. We talked about this pre-show, and the guys called me a nerd, so you're going to get some nerd information. is when we do a lot of our whiskeys here and ferment, you cook the mash with the grain in it, and then you just pump everything from the mash tun into the fermenter, so all the grain is still in it. And you let it ferment, you still it with all the grain, you run it through the still like that, you get your alcohol off, and then you throw everything out. It's just a big, wet, sloppy mess. To do it like an Irish and a Scottish single malt, since you're using all barley, the husk has a bitter flavor to it. And if you don't take the grain off before you ferment, you're going to leave the husks there, and it's going to give it a little more bitter taste to it. And to do that, you need some special equipment. Now, I'm guessing a lot of the American single malt companies are probably set up with that equipment, but what you're going to see is a lot of the smaller craft distilleries probably aren't going to take the grain off before they ferment. So you're going to have a lot of those bitter notes left in it. Bigger distilleries can easily afford the equipment. People that are just doing single malt probably have the equipment. But one thing you're probably going to see with a lot of the American single malts that are going to flood the market is they're by a distillery that doesn't have the setup that you would see that's similar to Irish or Scotch whiskey. Just because that stuff costs. The machine costs are pretty high for what you need to do that with. So, and if you're mainly producing whiskey, you don't need to run it through that machine, and then you have a machine worth tens of thousands of dollars just sitting there the majority of the season not doing anything, which isn't a great way to run a business.
Yeah,
no.
I'm looking forward to the Yellowstone single malt because that'll probably be the first like large scale distillery that's producing one. You know,
first Kentucky distillery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like I mean, Jack did theirs, but like there's not enough bottles for anyone to really have tried it. So
that's Tennessee.
Yeah.
But like for a Kentucky distillery to put out a single malt, I think is a pretty big step for American single malt.
Yeah.
Because if you when you're in Kentucky, you can't even find any Scotch on the shelves anywhere or in any bars. It's all bourbon.
Yeah.
But
I'm wondering,
Yellowstone.
I wonder what their price point will be on the Yellowstone too. Because if they undercut everybody, that'll probably be a big boost to the market overall.
Let's see. I just saw an article about it today.
Yeah, I actually over the weekend got to do a tasting down here. Joined the Sycamore Whiskey Club, and they had an event. A really nice barbecue joint. It's pretty badass, old school, vintage like lunch boxes and action figures and everything scattered throughout. They had an arcade at this barbecue joint. They sell whiskey. Like they had a bunch of whiskey to buy, just bottles you can go get.
That's pretty
neat.
I'm
guessing the owners are pretty big whiskey people, and it wasn't like the normal tasting that we're used to that we get spoiled with at Gold Eagle, where there was we had a rep. I think it was the local ambassador for Westward was there, but it was more of you were there to get your own food, talk to the people, and then you could go up and talk to the ambassador and find out the information and taste test everything. It was, for me, I had went in only knowing that our master distiller does not like Westward's base products. So I went in like, well, we're going to see what this tastes like. And they had their normal stuff, which I wasn't a big fan of, their normal release. Then they had a Pinot Noir finish cask, which was better, but nothing great. Then there was a stout finish cask, which I thought was
the one
pretty
I
decent.
Picked up last night.
I like the stout finish. I've had that. That's really good.
I almost bought the stout, and then I tried the cask strength. And I have 3 bottles of single malt in my house, and 2 of them are cask strength. So I think I've realized that as I'm getting used to single malt, I like the higher proof, which I'm the same way with whiskey, too. I'm usually 110 to 125 range is where I like to be. But
yeah, so the Yellowstone is... Go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say Yellowstone's 108 proof. I can't find the price anywhere. But it said it should be distributing nationally soon. And then I realized we forgot about Town Branch Distilling, who is in Kentucky and does a lot with high malt bourbon and single malt whiskey.
Nice. Yeah, we did this, and then they had a couple barrel picks from a very large liquor store in the Chicagoland area that will go unnamed. Rhymes with Finneys.
Thank you for not naming.
Got you. And those barrel picks were decent, Jake. And the one I thought was okay. The one was really good, and I think Jake R might have one of those barrel picks.
I got that one back on the shelf.
But it's a lighter color than what we're used to with whiskey or bourbon. I still get. It was funny because I tried this one right after the stout cask, and I thought some of the stout flavors were coming over. And I had a couple pours of this today, and I still get like a chocolate covered espresso bean out of it. It's got more of that chocolate. It also tastes like a chocolate malt. It's some
I just popped the bottle and got smacked with some like dark chocolate. You can smell it from here.
It's good. The proof on this at cask strength is 125. It doesn't taste anywhere near that strong. It's decent. I wouldn't say it's great. I was there. I wanted to help support the people that showed up. So I bought one of the 6 cask strengths they had and probably stopped someone from that really, really wanted it from getting it. But you know what? Get there sooner. That's what I got to say. But no, it's good. It's interesting, but it tastes nothing like the Glenallachie cask strength that I have from that's Speyside too, isn't it, Jake?
Yes.
I got a Glenallachie and I got a Glenrothes that I both much prefer to this. But something different to round out the collection. I don't have. Well, I guess I do have a Balcones single malt too that I got a long time ago, which I think I actually prefer this to the Balcones single malt. But I know I do prefer this to the Balcones single malt.
Yeah, I did not like the Balcones. I got like a lot of smoke on the Balcones, from what I remember. I wonder if they're, probably not peating it, but smoking it somehow.
Well, it's Texas, so all the barbecue grills in the area just kind of get infused into the barrel.
It also ages so fast there.
Yeah.
One thing I just realized that they didn't put, and I guess it wouldn't matter one way or the other really, but the majority of the Irish and Scottish distilleries are using pot stills. This doesn't say that it has to be a pot still, so you could probably run a massive amount through quickly. I don't know if there's pluses or minuses to that besides mass production. But a lot of the stuff that when you think of malts, you're thinking of the old style pot still.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder if they're using like column stills and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Yeah.
Did you get to see what Stranahan's was using?
I don't. Yeah. Pretty sure it was a column still.
Jake, there's pot shops.
Back in my pictures.
There's pot shops in the area. Jake doesn't remember anything from the trip.
I'm going to look back at my pictures because I'm sure I would have taken a picture of the still.
Yeah, if you have the means to do a column, you might as well. And if it's not a requirement to use anything else, then
yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it grows and evolves. And unfortunately, there's probably going to be a lot of shitty single malts that come out too that are American. It's just think of all the really good whiskeys that you have. Or that you had, and a lot of them are from distilleries that have been around for a really, really long time, or have a master distiller that have been doing it for a really, really long time, because it takes time to learn how to make things that taste good. I mean, we talked about Castle and Key not too long ago. They're having to relearn everything, and they're changing every batch to try and find the one that works the best and the one that tastes the best. It takes time, so a lot of the stuff when it first comes out, it's probably not going to be the greatest. You know? in all honesty.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, there's bad bourbons just like there's bad scotches. So I'm sure there's going to be some questionable single malts. There's no age requirement on single malts, is there?
Not for American Single Malt in the designation.
No. Yeah, which is surprising considering almost everything else has some sort of requirement.
So it's kind of hard to believe a little bit that all these big distilleries that have been making such good bourbon for so long and are known for their bourbon are starting to distill American Single Malt. But I think that just really shows that how much that they forecast the future. That they actually think American Single Malt's going to take off, and the average drinker is going to start experimenting with it a little bit. And I did look up Stranahan still is a combination still, so a pot still and a column still.
Oh, okay.
In one, which is pretty cool.
Is it? Nice. Yes, probably it's very similar to what we use because we have a hybrid still too, pot and column.
Yeah, it's probably the same thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me because if you look at. Yeah, I don't remember when we covered this. It was a long time ago now, but we talked about how whiskey, or particularly bourbon, is climbing the ranks of like the top spirit in the world. It actually, I think, recently was unseated by like tequila and mezcal as number one or number two. But for a very, very long time, Scotch was number one. I think was unseated by bourbon. I have to go back and look, but
no, I think that's right.
Check that, like episode 4.
Probably I don't about that. I mean, obviously for the U.S., yeah, but I don't know about the rest of the world.
For the U.S., bourbon is definitely number one.
Yeah, well, actually, this year was the first year that tequila sales passed bourbon in the U.S.
That's right. Yeah.
But Scotch has taken a huge dive in the U.S.
Right.
And
so that's what I'm wondering if this the American Single Malt push is a play against Scotch. If you're going to take a shot at the king, best not miss. So,
yeah. I mean, I would think it would only help Scotch sales though, because when people start enjoying American Single Malt, they might reach for a Scotch once in a while.
Yeah.
Especially something non-peaty if they don't like the.
I was going to say, but maybe that's the play is when you think of and even till not that long ago, if you asked me what a Scotch was, I'd say no because it tastes like it's peat. And I think that you have a lot of whiskey drinkers that are still going to think the same thing, that all Scotch is peated and tastes like an ashtray, and not realizing that that's one part of Scotland, and there's a lot of Scotches that aren't peated. There's a lot of Irishes that are the same. So I wonder if that's maybe they're taking a play of, hey, we'll go this route because it won't be whatever everyone thinks they don't like about Scotch, we're not going to have.
Right.
So it's easy to market, which could be a reason too.
Yeah.
But no, it's fun. It's something different. I think the downside to me, and one of the reasons why I'm staying away as much as possible and trying not to drink too much single malt, is it just seems like another money hole.
That's the other thing too. That's the excuse I get all the time is people say I don't want to get all into another spirit, and then I'll start collecting that and building a bar of that. So yeah.
Because you can't have a bourbon room and then a single malt room.
You can have a single malt shelf.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just a whole nother rabbit hole, and once you really start to get into it and get more into it, you're just going to want to have a bigger selection on hand, and it's good.
Well, I like to have a Scotch or an Irish on hand, just if I'm not feeling bourbon or rye. It's something else to kind of shake things up, for a night or so. And it almost like a palate cleanser, if you're getting tired of drinking bourbon, it's okay, I need to really shake it up a little bit. A good Scotch or a good Irish whiskey is a really nice alternative.
Yeah, so I actually like peat, so I have a shelf on my whiskey area that is all peated scotches.
Okay. You were telling me you actually prefer Scotch to bourbon, right?
I don't know.
Or
I
is
go
it
through
close?
phases. I go through phases. I would say 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would say I preferred Scotch. But my job has kind of taken me into the bourbon world and won't let me get out of there. So I'm definitely more on the bourbon side now. But I go through phases where I drink Scotch for a couple weeks and then go back to bourbon. So. Mm-hmm. But only peated Scotch. Like sometimes I just crave the peat and the smoke, and the peatier the better. Lefroy, Ardbeg, Lagavulin, and I feel like if I'm drinking not peated Scotches, I might as well just be drinking bourbon or American Single Malt.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny when we talked about tequila taking over as the number one spirit. And it's interesting to see the tequila companies changing with the times as well, too. It's like I'm not a huge tequila guy, but one of the first tequilas I ever tried that I liked was Adictivo. And I'm like, okay, that's a good tequila. I can drink that straight and not feel like I did in college when I had
very
tequila.
Sweet.
But it was, someone brought it into work the other day. It was a tequila I had never had. It was Corazon. But it was finished in Weller barrels. And so I was just thinking, like, Adictivo now has a whiskey that they make that's aged in tequila barrels. And then you're also sealing, I guess they have a Weller-aged barrel for Corazon, or however you say it. And then
we actually have a Corazon single barrel aging in one of our Buffalo Trace barrels.
Do you?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I've seen. I looked it up then because they must do a lot with Buffalo Trace because they also have tequila aging in Eagle Rare barrels and an Elmer T barrel.
Yeah, Sazerac owns them.
That makes sense.
And that's like their big tequila brand that they're really trying to push.
I will say that that tequila tasted very different from most tequilas that I had. That it was finished. And I liked it a lot, which I think, unfortunately, that if I go into another spirit, it's probably going to go over to more of the tequila side, which sucks because that gets more expensive than whiskey real quick.
Yeah, but the tequila, like, you need something like tequila for when it's 90 degrees in the summertime. You can't be drinking bourbon all day.
Yeah.
It's when you just put some mint leaves and some crushed ice in the glass. It works just fine.
If that
that was
your boat, then that's fine.
You talked me into going to that mezcal tasting, which I kind of just did out of support for the store. But I was blown away by how good that was.
Yeah.
I was really surprised how much I actually enjoyed it. And I think it's a similar misconception with mezcal as the American Single Malt, where you're expecting it to be smoky. Actually, a majority of the mezcals aren't smoked,
right?
If I'm correct.
Yeah.
And the ones we tried, I think one of them was at that tasting. It was very, very light, and actually really enhanced the flavors. But that was I'm blanking on the name of the
Mezcal Amras.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I'm so pissed that I missed out on that one. It's like the
Cinco Sentidos one.
It was one of the limited ones. It was like the Toro.
The bottle? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think it was the Toro or something like that.
Sakatoro.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That
was my favorite by far.
We might have gotten more of that.
Okay. I'll check next time I'm in.
Yeah, let me know because I'll give you the discount price from the tasting. But
I got to pick up that Blonde Brothers too.
Ooh, yeah.
So, I mean, I was going to be extremely jealous of your last tasting. Unfortunately, due to some circumstances, Greg Metz couldn't be there. But talk about the Old Elk tasting, because that wasn't the first one I did, but that was one of the earlier ones that we did when we started coming to all of them.
Yeah.
And we did that big whole bracket from Old Elk, but that was one where I was there and we tasted everything, and I thought all their expressions held up very well, and really made me open my eyes to Old Elk. What was all there? How'd you guys? How'd this one go?
Really good. Yeah, I mean, we tasted a lot of the things that we tasted last time, but there were 3 new things, I think, on this one.
Yeah, and I believe it was like the new version of the Infinity, new version of Sour Mash.
Yep.
And then,
and then the 2 that aren't available yet but are coming, which is the Wheaten Rye, and the one that stole the show for me was the Rum Finish Rye, which I already asked Jake if I could get a case because it was so good. I told Jenna that last night, and she got really mad at me.
No, I couldn't understand why.
Don't worry, we'll give you a good price.
But yeah, I mean, the whole Old Elk lineup is pretty fantastic,
and very different too.
Yeah, not really the traditional bourbon flavors, because they do, or Greg experimented a lot with the mash bills. Like we talked about, the straight bourbon has very high malt content, with the intent of mellowing out the whiskey a lot, which it does exactly that. And I think it was intended to be like an extremely smooth, extremely drinkable whiskey, which it definitely accomplishes.
Yeah, I remember that story where our first time was there. Is they just wanted something that was easy to drink at the lodge.
Yeah.
Yep. On his Old Elk Ranch. But yeah, Greg, coming from MGP, you know, he's got so much experience with so many different mash bills. And tasting all these different mash bills over his 40-plus year career, you know, that's experience that you can't learn from a book, you can't learn from a classroom. That's just you know, going out there and doing it, and him being able to bring that to Old Elk and use his creativity and what he knows to create all these different mash bills is very cool. Because the typical distillery, I mean, look at Buffalo Trace. They have 3 mash bills and 25 different whiskeys.
Yeah.
So, you know, to Old Elk kind of take the new school approach and to just distill differently is very bold and, you know, also very cool to taste.
Yeah, the big benefit of MGP is that there's probably like hundreds, if not thousands, of mash bills, you know, that he's gotten to you know, create over the course of his career there. Except for the rye, there's one, and it's fantastic.
Yep.
But
95.5.
yeah, it's the ability to experiment at Old Elk is clearly yielding really cool results. We tried the double wheat Masters blends last night, which is Dan's absolute favorite.
That's a top 10 whiskey for me.
Yeah,
I love that whiskey.
I'm just a sucker. I'm just a
Jake,
sucker
do you
for
love
the
that
rye.
whiskey better than the rye, though? Because there's 2 people on the podcast that think the Old Elk Rye is better than the double wheat, and I call those people idiots.
I like the double wheat better.
Thank you. Thank you. From someone that does this professionally and runs a business because of this, is on my side.
There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you
No, there
like.
is. There is. They're completely wrong. Jake and Roberto are completely wrong on this.
Well, now we're tied, so we got to have a tiebreaker.
Well, I see 2 people in the industry that voted for double wheat, and 2 people that have nothing to do with the alcohol industry that don't know what they're talking about say rye. So
it's very different, though. That's a hard head-to-head battle.
Yeah.
It's 2 very
tough.
different pours.
I mean, the double wheat, I think, smoked everything on that side of the bracket.
Yeah, there wasn't no, it ran into something. I think it was always 3-zip, but it ran into something where he debated a little bit. But
maybe it was the straight wheat.
No, because the straight wheat was on the opposite side.
Was it?
Straight
Okay.
wheat lost to rye.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
A single barrel,
double
maybe?
check, but
I can't remember, but no, it was.
maybe
cool.
it was your single barrel. You have to double check.
We talked about it earlier of, like with American Single Malts, it's going to take some distilleries a while to get everything dialed in. But like Old Elk started with one of the distillers who's produced probably some of the most alcohol in U.S. history.
Yeah.
As their new master distiller. So them getting up and running quick was a little bit easier. But I guess when you have all that OtterBox money behind you.
The double wheat went up against the Gold Eagle pick. So I think that's where the debate was.
Yeah, the double wheat is just so soft. Again, that's why, like, in blind tastings, those soft whiskeys usually hold their own.
Yeah. All right.
Nice. Jake, thanks for joining us and filling in for Roberto again.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be on here.
What's all going on at Gold Eagle?
How do you mean?
Well, any new events? Where can people find Gold Eagle?
So Gold Eagle is 255 Peterson Road in Libertyville. Find us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine, Facebook at Gold Eagle Wine or Gold Eagle Spirits.
Gold Eagle Wine and Spirits, I believe. I looked it up just to be safe.
Okay, awesome. You know better than me. Download our app on the Apple Store or Google Play Store. You can see our whole inventory and shop online, and then we hold your online orders. And we are actually going to start shipping soon, hopefully,
Nice.
to other states and within Illinois. We do a lot of tasting events, live tasting events, usually on Tuesday nights. We've got a really, really good rum and cognac tasting next Tuesday. And then,
Nice.
Speaking of single malt, we're going to be releasing a Kilhoman single barrel that we picked and doing a tasting with them on the 21st of March to release that barrel. And those tickets aren't even up yet, but they will be up soon.
Cool.
So if a single malt fan, definitely check that out. But, yeah.
Nice.
All right, am I stuck doing our socials then?
Jake, you're stuck doing everything here. I'm not. I'm the guy that leads everybody into it. I don't do any work after the lead.
You can find us at Bourbon Matters on Instagram. Search for Bourbon Matters on Facebook. Bourbon Matters on YouTube. Like, rate, subscribe. Hit the notification bell on whatever platform. Leave a review. Leave comments. All that stuff helps. Then you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Well, single malts was a little bit different sidestep for us tonight. Something new, something intriguing. We'll see how it grows and develops, but it was fun to do.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of promising things, even though it's a little limited right now. But we should be seeing a lot in the next few years, I think.
Yeah. Nice. Cheers, guys.
All right.
Yep.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thanks.